The room held its breath. 200 pairs of eyes fixed on a single figure seated at a gleaming grand piano. Her hands trembled above the ivory keys, fingers poised but uncertain. The woman at the piano wore a simple black server's uniform, her name tag still pinned to her chest. Naomi Brooks, 28 years old. A waitress who just moments ago had been clearing champagne glasses and passing hors d'oeuvres. Standing behind her, arms crossed with a satisfied smirk, was Victoria Ashford. Designer gown, diamond necklace worth more than most people earn in a lifetime. The host of this lavish charity gala. And the woman who had just publicly humiliated Naomi in front of Connecticut's wealthiest elite. Well, Victoria's voice dripped with condescension. "We're all waiting. Show us what you can do. Or can you even play at all?" Scattered laughter rippled through the crowd. Some guests looked uncomfortable, shifting their weight from foot to foot. Others leaned in with curiosity phones already out and recording. The autumn night outside the mansion's floor-to-ceiling windows seemed to press against the glass, as if the darkness itself wanted to witness what would happen next. Naomi's fingers touched the keys. The first note hung in the air like a question mark. And then everything changed. But to understand why this moment mattered, why it would reverberate far beyond this single evening, we need to go back. Back to where it all began. 3 hours earlier, when Naomi Brooks arrived at the Ashford estate with nothing more than the hope of earning enough money to pay next month's rent. This is the story of how cruelty became the catalyst for something extraordinary. How a single act of courage transformed not just one life, but many. How the most powerful weapon against injustice turned out to be something as simple and as profound as truth. Let's start at the beginning. The November air carried the scent of dying leaves and wood smoke as Naomi Brooks pulled her 13-year-old Honda Civic into the service entrance of the Ashford estate. It was 6 o'clock in the evening and already dark. The mansion loomed above her, all stone and glass, and old money lit up like a castle from some fairy tale she'd never been invited to read. She checked her reflection in the rearview mirror one last time. Hair pulled back in a neat bun. Minimal makeup. The crisp white shirt and black vest of her catering uniform pressed to perfection. She'd learned years ago that in her line of work, invisibility was a virtue. The less the guests noticed you, the better the tips. Naomi grabbed her small backpack from the passenger seat and headed toward the service door, where a harried-looking catering manager was already checking names off a clipboard. "Brooks, you're late. Sorry, traffic on I-95 was, I don't need excuses. I need servers. The guests start arriving in 30 minutes. You're on champagne duty for cocktail hour, then you'll rotate to the main hall for the seated dinner. Questions?" Naomi shook her head. She'd done this hundreds of times before. Weddings, corporate events, fundraisers, galas. This was her second job, the one that kept the lights on in the small apartment she shared with her younger sister, Maya. Her primary job was waitressing at a diner on the outskirts of Bridgeport. Breakfast shift, lunch shift, then straight to evening catering gigs. Sleep was something she'd learned to do in 4-hour increments. Inside the mansion's service areas, the organized chaos of event preparation was in full swing. Chefs shouted orders in French-accented English. Servers hurried past carrying silver trays. Ice sculptures dripped onto plastic sheeting. The smell of garlic and butter and expensive perfume mixed into something both enticing and overwhelming. Naomi found her station and picked up her tray of champagne flutes. The glasses were crystal, she noticed. Probably worth more than her car. She took a steadying breath and pushed through the door into the main hall. The contrast was immediate and absolute. Where the service areas hummed with practical energy, the guest spaces whispered wealth. Marble floors reflected the light from 3 massive chandeliers. Oil paintings in gilded frames lined the walls. A string quartet played softly in one corner. The guests themselves were dressed like they'd stepped out of a fashion magazine, all designer labels and practiced elegance. Naomi moved through the crowd with practiced efficiency. Champagne smile, pour, move on. Don't make eye contact unless spoken to. Don't speak unless asked a direct question. Exist, but don't be seen existing. It was during her 3rd circuit of the room that she first saw Victoria Ashford. The woman stood at the center of a small crowd, holding court like a queen among her subjects. She was in her mid-40s, impeccably put together in a midnight blue gown that probably cost more than Naomi earned in 6 months. Her blonde hair was swept up in an elaborate updo. Diamonds glittered at her throat, her ears, her wrists. She laughed at something one of her companions said, the sound bright and sharp like breaking glass. This was Victoria's house, her event. A charity fundraiser ostensibly to benefit some arts education program for underprivileged youth. The irony wasn't lost on Naomi. The wealthy gathering to congratulate themselves for their generosity, while the actual underprivileged served them drinks. But Naomi had learned not to dwell on such ironies. They didn't pay the bills. She was refilling champagne glasses near the grand staircase when it happened. A guest brushed past her, sudden and unexpected. Naomi stumbled slightly, and the bottle in her hand tilted. Champagne splashed a golden arc in the light and landed directly on the sleeve of another guest's cream-colored dress. Oh my God. The woman jumped back, staring at the spreading stain. Naomi's heart sank. "I'm so sorry. Please let me." "You clumsy girl." The woman's voice rose above the ambient conversation. Heads turned. The string quartet seemed to quiet. "It was an accident. I'm so sorry. I'll get something to clean it right away. Do you have any idea how much this dress cost?" Naomi did not, but she could guess. Thousands, maybe tens of thousands. More than she'd earn all year, certainly. She set down her tray with shaking hands and pulled a clean napkin from her apron. "Please let me help. Don't touch it." The woman pulled away, as if Naomi carried some contagion. "You've done quite enough." And that's when Victoria Ashford glided over, drawn by the commotion like a shark to blood in the water. What seems to be the problem here? Her voice was smooth, cultured, and somehow managed to sound both concerned and condescending simultaneously. The guest with the stained dress launched into an explanation, gesturing dramatically at the spreading champagne stain. Victoria listened with an expression of exaggerated sympathy, occasionally glancing at Naomi with something that might have been pity, but looked more like disdain. "I see," Victoria said when the guest finished her tirade. She turned to Naomi. "What's your name?" "Naomi Brooks, ma'am." "Well, Naomi Brooks, it seems you've caused quite a disruption to our evening." Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Margaret here is wearing a vintage Chanel. I hope you understand the gravity of your mistake." "Yes, ma'am. I'm very sorry. It was an accident." "Accidents happen, of course." Victoria's tone suggested she didn't quite believe this particular accident was unintentional. "But in a place like this, with guests like these, we expect a certain level of competence. Do you think you can manage that, or should I speak with your supervisor about finding someone more capable?" The words landed like small, precise cuts. Naomi felt her face grow hot. Around them, other guests had stopped to watch. Some looked uncomfortable. Others seemed entertained by the drama. A few were definitely recording on their phones. "I can manage, ma'am," Naomi said quietly. "It won't happen again. See that it doesn't." Victoria turned back to Margaret, her voice shifting to something warmer, more solicitous. "Now, Margaret, let's get you upstairs to one of the guest rooms. I'm sure we can find something for you to change into. And of course, I'll personally cover the cost of any cleaning or restoration your dress requires." She placed a hand on Margaret's arm and began guiding her toward the stairs, but not before throwing one more glance back at Naomi. "You, clean this up, and try not to destroy anything else this evening." Naomi stood frozen for a moment, her hands still clutching the napkin. Around her, conversation slowly resumed. The string quartet picked up their tempo, but she could still feel eyes on her, judging, assessing, finding her wanting. She knelt and began soaking up the spilled champagne with her napkin, her movements mechanical. A hand appeared in her field of vision, offering a cloth napkin. Naomi looked up to see an older gentleman, distinguished-looking in a gray suit. "Looked like an accident to me," he said quietly, kindly. "Don't let it get to you." "Thank you, sir." Naomi took the napkin and finished cleaning up the spill. But as she returned to the service area to compose herself, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted in the room. Victoria Ashford had noticed her, and somehow Naomi suspected that was going to be a problem. The dinner service went smoothly, at least from a technical standpoint. Naomi moved through her duties with the kind of autopilot precision that comes from years of similar work. Salad course, soup course, entree. She kept her head down, her movements efficient, her expression neutral. But Victoria Ashford seemed to have marked her as a target. It started with small things. As Naomi poured water at Victoria's table, the woman made a pointed comment about the help these days to her dinner companions, loud enough for Naomi to clearly hear. When Naomi cleared the soup bowls, Victoria suddenly moved her arm, causing Naomi to have to reach awkwardly around her, then complained loudly about being jostled. Each interaction was designed to humiliate, and each time Naomi bit her tongue and kept working. She couldn't afford to lose this job. The catering company paid better than most of her alternatives, and she'd already worked 3 events this week. She needed every dollar. Maya's college applications were due in 2 months, and the application fees alone were going to stretch their already tight budget. They were still paying off the medical bills from when Maya had pneumonia last winter, and the rent was going up again in January. So Naomi endured. She smiled when spoken to. She apologized when Victoria found fault with the way she'd arranged a napkin or the angle at which she'd placed a wine glass. She made herself small and quiet and as invisible as possible. But Victoria wasn't done. It was during the dessert course, after the speeches and the fundraising appeal and the check presentation, when the real trouble began. The guests had moved from the formal dining room into the mansion's grand ballroom, a cavernous space with soaring ceilings and walls lined with expensive art. A jazz trio had replaced the string quartet. People milled about with drinks and conversation, the formal portions of the evening giving way to social mingling. Naomi was clearing dessert plates from a side table when she heard Victoria's voice ring out across the room. "Oh, there you are, Naomi. Isn't it?" Naomi turned to find Victoria approaching with a small group of guests in tow. The woman's smile was predatory. "Yes, ma'am. Can I get you anything? Actually, I wanted to apologize." Victoria's voice carried across the space, drawing attention from nearby guests. "I feel I may have been too harsh with you earlier. It's just that we have standards here, and when someone fails to meet them, well." She trailed off with a delicate shrug. Naomi felt her stomach tighten. This wasn't an apology. This was something else entirely. That's very kind of you, ma'am, but really, there's no need. No, I insist. Victoria took a step closer. You see, my friends and I were just discussing the importance of the work you people do. Serving, cleaning, making sure everything runs smoothly for those of us who actually contribute to society. It's honest work, even if it's simple work. The condescension dripped from every word. Naomi's hands clenched around the plates she was holding. We should all be grateful, Victoria continued, that there are people like you willing to do the jobs that require, shall we say, less intellectual capacity. Not everyone can be a doctor or a lawyer or a business person, after all. Someone has to clear the tables. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. Others watched with the kind of horrified fascination people reserve for car crashes and reality TV. Naomi could feel the heat rising in her face, the sting of tears she absolutely would not allow to fall. If you'll excuse me, ma'am, I need to return these plates to the kitchen. Oh, but we were just getting to know you. Victoria's hand shot out and grasped Naomi's wrist, not hard enough to hurt, but firmly enough to prevent easy escape. Tell me, Naomi, what do you do when you're not serving at events like this? I assume you must have other jobs. People in your position usually do, don't they? Naomi tried to pull her wrist free, but Victoria's grip tightened. I work at a diner, ma'am. Now, please, I really need to… A diner. How charming. And where did you go to school? Community college? Or did you not finish high school? The questions weren't really questions. They were weapons. Each one designed to cut, to diminish, to remind Naomi of her place in Victoria's carefully ordered world. I graduated high school, Naomi said, her voice tight. If you'll excuse me, but no college. That explains so much. You see, education is really what separates us, don't you think? Victoria addressed this question to her companions, finally releasing Naomi's wrist. I went to Vassar myself, then Yale for my MBA. It opens doors, creates opportunities. The kind of opportunities that people like Naomi here will simply never have access to. Not because of any failing on her part, mind you. She was simply born into a different world than ours, a lesser world if we're being honest. Something inside Naomi cracked. Years of biting her tongue, years of enduring casual cruelty from people who saw her as little more than furniture. Years of being invisible until someone needed someone to look down on. You don't know anything about me, Naomi said quietly. Victoria raised an eyebrow. I'm sorry I said you don't know anything about me. Naomi's voice was stronger now. You see a uniform, and you make assumptions. You see someone serving you, and you decide that makes you better. But you don't know where I've been, or what I've overcome, or what I'm capable of. The conversations around them had stopped. The jazz trio seemed to sense the tension and let their current song trail off without starting another. The ballroom, which moments ago had buzzed with dozens of separate conversations, fell into a watching silence. Victoria's smile had frozen on her face. My dear girl, I think the stress of the evening has gotten to you. Perhaps you should take a break. I had a full scholarship to the Juilliard School, Naomi said. The words came out before she could stop them, before she could remember all the reasons she never talked about this. Pre-college division first. Then I was accepted into their undergraduate program. Full ride. I was going to study piano performance. Victoria's expression shifted slightly. Was going to… My parents died in a car accident the summer before I was supposed to start. I was 16. My sister was 8. There was no one else. So I became her legal guardian, got my GED, and started working to support us both. I gave up Juilliard because my family was more important than my dreams. The silence in the room was absolute. Naomi could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. She'd said too much. revealed too much, but she couldn't seem to stop. So, no, I didn't go to Vassar. I didn't get an MBA from Yale. But don't mistake my circumstances for my worth. Don't confuse what I do to survive with who I am. For a long moment, Victoria just stared at her. Then her expression hardened into something cold and calculating. Juilliard, how impressive. And piano, you say? Victoria's eyes drifted across the ballroom to where a magnificent grand piano sat in the far corner, draped partially in shadow. Well, then this is perfect. You see, we were just discussing the need for some musical entertainment. The trio is on their break, and here you are, a trained pianist from Juilliard, or so you claim. Naomi's blood ran cold. That's not what I insist. Victoria's voice cut through Naomi's protest like a knife. We would all be absolutely delighted to hear you play, wouldn't we? She addressed this last question to the gathered guests. Some nodded enthusiastically, caught up in the drama. Others looked away uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. A few pulled out their phones again, already anticipating the viral moment this might become. Mrs. Ashford. I haven't played in years. I couldn't possibly. Oh, but you must. After all you were training at Juilliard, one of the world's most prestigious music schools, surely you haven't forgotten everything you learned there? Victoria's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. Unless, of course, you were exaggerating about your supposed scholarship, making up stories to seem more interesting than you really are. The trap was perfectly laid. If Naomi refused, Victoria would claim she'd been lying about Juilliard humiliating her even further. If she agreed and played poorly, Victoria would have her public humiliation either way. And if she simply left, walked out of the mansion and never looked back, she'd still lose. Her dignity, her job, the money she desperately needed. There was no good option. No way to win. Naomi set down the dessert plates on a nearby table with shaking hands. She could feel 200 pairs of eyes on her. Could hear the click and beep of phone cameras already recording. Could sense the anticipation rippling through the crowd like electricity before a storm. Fine, she heard herself say. I'll play. Victoria's smile widened. Wonderful, everyone, please gather around. We're about to be treated to a special performance by our very talented server, Naomi Brooks. Juilliard trained, no less. The crowd moved toward the piano, forming a loose semicircle. Some guests claimed nearby chairs. Others stood in small clusters, drinks in hand, waiting for the show. The jazz trio, returning from their break, paused near the stage area, instruments in hand, watching with professional curiosity. Naomi walked toward the piano on legs that felt disconnected from her body. Each step took her further from safety and closer to a moment that would either destroy her or define her. She wasn't sure which outcome scared her more. The piano itself was a Steinway Grand Black and gleaming under the ballroom's chandeliers. Naomi had dreamed of pianos like this when she was younger, had imagined herself on concert stages, her fingers flying across keys, just like these audiences hanging on every note. But that was a lifetime ago, a different person's dream. She reached the piano and stood beside it, one hand resting on the closed lid. Her fingers trembled. In the crowd, she could see Victoria watching her with barely concealed glee. Could see other faces too, some sympathetic, some judgmental, most simply curious. And then near the back of the crowd, she saw a flash of movement. A young woman in a server's uniform, half hidden behind a marble column. Maya. Her sister had somehow finagled a job on the catering crew without telling Naomi, probably to help contribute to their stretched finances. Maya's eyes were wide with concern, and something else. Pride, maybe. Or hope. Naomi thought about her parents, about the countless hours her mother had spent driving her to piano lessons and rehearsals, about her father's face in the audience at her first recital beaming with uncontainable joy, about the scholarship letter that had arrived 3 weeks after the accident, while she was still sleeping on a cot in her new social worker's office, trying to figure out how to raise an 8-year-old when she was barely more than a child herself. She thought about every choice she'd made in the 12 years since. The dreams deferred, the sleep lost, the aching exhaustion of working multiple jobs while watching her sister grow up in 5-minute increments between shifts, the weight of responsibility she'd never asked for, but had carried anyway, because that's what family meant. And she thought about her mother's voice from one of those long-ago drives home from a competition. The piano isn't about proving anything to anyone else, baby. It's about being honest. About taking everything you feel and everything you are and letting it flow out through your fingers. That's where the real music lives. Not in the notes on the page, but in the truth you bring to them. Naomi pulled out the piano bench and sat down. The leather was cool against her legs. She adjusted the bench's height muscle memory kicking in despite the years. Her fingers hovered over the keys. The room held its breath. Victoria's voice rang out one more time. "We're all waiting, dear. Show us what Juilliard taught you. Or can't you remember how to play?" Naomi closed her eyes. She let out a slow breath. And then she placed her fingers on the keys and began to play. The first notes were tentative, soft, almost apologetic. Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, but just the opening measures played solo without the orchestra that usually accompanies this piece. It's a work of profound melancholy and sweeping emotion, and it begins with a series of somber chords that build in intensity. Naomi's hands shook through those first chords. Her fingers felt stiff, unpracticed. She hit a wrong note, then another. In the crowd, she could sense Victoria's satisfied smile, could almost hear the woman's internal commentary about exposure and humiliation. But then something shifted. The music began to flow. Not perfectly, there were still small mistakes, moments of hesitation, but with increasing confidence. Naomi's hands remembered what her mind had tried to forget. The way certain fingers curved over certain keys. The pressure needed for forte versus piano. The subtle wrist movements that connected one phrase to the next. She played through the opening section, and then instead of stopping where the orchestra usually enters, she transitioned seamlessly into a different piece. Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat, Major Op. 9, No. 2. A work of ethereal beauty and intimate emotion. In the audience, the smirks began to fade. Conversations died mid-sentence. Phones that had been held up to capture a humiliating failure stayed up, but now recorded something else entirely. Something unexpected. Naomi's eyes remained closed, but tears had begun to slip down her cheeks. The music pulled memories from deep inside her. Her mother's hands guiding her fingers on the keys when she was 5 years old. Her father's off-key singing along to her practice sessions. Her first piano teacher, Mrs. Chen, who had recognized something special in the girl from the modest neighborhood and had given her lessons for free when her parents couldn't afford them. The acceptance letter from Juilliard, with its official seal and congratulatory language, the weight of it in her hands. The way her parents had cried with joy holding her between them, talking about her bright future. And then the phone call from the state trooper. The funeral with 2 closed caskets because the accident had been that bad. The social worker's office that smelled like coffee and sadness. The choice that wasn't really a choice let Maya go into foster care or take responsibility for raising her. She'd been 16 years old, and she'd chosen love over everything else. The Chopin Nocturne gave way to Debussy's Clair de Lune. The notes floated through the ballroom like drops of moonlight made audible. Somewhere in the piece's tender middle section, Naomi opened her eyes and looked out at the crowd. What she saw stopped her breath for just a moment. They were transfixed. Completely and utterly transfixed. Victoria Ashford stood near the front of the group, and her expression had transformed from smugness to something between shock and disbelief. Other guests had tears in their eyes. Some swayed gently to the music. Others stood completely still, as if afraid that any movement might shatter the spell. In the back, Maya was crying openly, one hand pressed to her mouth. And Naomi understood something profound in that moment. The music wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to everyone who heard it. Every note carried the collective weight of human emotion, loss, and love, grief, and hope, pain, and transcendence. She was playing for every person who had ever been underestimated. Every person who had sacrificed their dreams for someone else. Every person who had been made to feel small by people like Victoria Ashford. She transitioned again, this time to something few classical pianists attempt, Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue, but arranged for solo piano. The piece begins with a playful, almost cheeky clarinet glissando in its full orchestral version, but Naomi translated that opening into a cascade of notes that danced across the keyboard with jazz-inflected joy. This was different from the earlier pieces. Where Rachmaninoff and Chopin had drawn tears, Gershwin brought smiles. The music was alive with American energy, with the sound of cities and possibility and dreams that refuse to die, no matter how hard life tries to kill them. Naomi's fingers flew across the keys now. The stiffness was gone. The hesitation had vanished. This was muscle memory that went deeper than conscious thought. This was 12 years of suppressed passion finding its outlet all at once. She played the famous piano solo section of Rhapsody in Blue, her hands crossing each other in the rapid runs, her entire body swaying with the rhythm. The Steinway sang under her touch, its rich tone filling every corner of the massive ballroom. The chandeliers seemed to sway with the music. The very air vibrated with sound. For 5 minutes, then 10, then 15, Naomi played. She moved between pieces, weaving them together in an improvised medley that told her story without words. Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata for the darkness that had followed her parents' death. Liszt's Consolation, Number 3, for the quiet moments of Maya's childhood that she'd been privileged to witness. Even a bit of Scott Joplin's The Entertainer, which had been her father's favorite, which he'd always asked her to play on Sunday mornings. And then finally, she returned to Rachmaninoff. The same opening chords she'd started with, but this time played with complete authority and shattering emotion. The notes built and built, crescendoing to a climax that filled the room with sound so intense it felt almost physical. Naomi's whole body was engaged now. Shoulders, arms, back, legs, everything working in concert to produce this wall of musical intensity. Sweat beaded on her forehead. Tears streamed down her face. Her fingers hammered the keys with controlled violence, drawing out every ounce of emotion the instrument could produce. This was fury and grief and love and loss and hope and despair all mixed together. This was 12 years of silence finding its voice. This was every humiliation she'd endured, every insult she'd swallowed. Every moment she'd made herself small and quiet and invisible, all transformed into something beautiful and defiant and true. The final chord rang out like a declaration, like a battle cry, like a prayer. And then silence. Naomi's hands remained on the keys, the last notes still reverberating through the room. She was shaking, sobbing quietly, completely spent. For 3 heartbeats, 4, 5, no one moved. No one spoke. The silence was so complete that Naomi could hear her own ragged breathing, could hear the distant tick of a grandfather clock in some other room. And then someone started clapping. It was the older gentleman who had offered her his napkin earlier. He stood and applauded, his face wet with tears. And then someone else joined in, and another, and another. Within seconds, the entire ballroom was on its feet. The applause started as a rumble and built to a roar. People weren't just clapping, they were shouting, calling out words of praise and encouragement. Someone yelled "Brava!" Others simply wept and applauded until their hands hurt. Naomi remained seated at the piano, overwhelmed. This wasn't possible. This wasn't real. People like her didn't get moments like this. But it was happening. It was real. She finally looked up and found Victoria Ashford in the crowd. The woman's face had gone pale. Her expression cycled through shock, disbelief, and finally landed on something that looked almost like fear. The tables had turned completely, and Victoria seemed to understand that she was no longer the one in control of this narrative. A man pushed through the crowd toward the piano. He was in his 60s, distinguished-looking, with silver hair and kind eyes. Richard Hayes, Naomi would learn later. A longtime friend of Victoria's late husband, and technically the co-host of this event. "My dear Richard," said, his voice choked with emotion that was absolutely extraordinary. "I haven't been moved like that by music in 20 years. Naomi tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. Richard reached out a steadying hand. "Thank you," Naomi managed to say. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have what? Revealed yourself to be a world-class talent." Richard shook his head firmly. "You have nothing to apologize for, nothing at all." He turned to address the crowd, raising his voice to be heard over the continuing applause. "Ladies and gentlemen, I think we've just witnessed something truly special. Naomi Brooks has given us a gift tonight, a reminder that talent and beauty and art can come from anywhere, that we should never ever judge people by their circumstances or their occupations." His eyes found Victoria in the crowd, and his expression hardened slightly. "And that cruelty in the name of entertainment is never acceptable. Not in this house. Not in any house." Victoria's mouth opened, then closed. She looked around at the faces surrounding her, faces that had been friendly and admiring just an hour ago, but now held judgment and disappointment. "Richard, you were being cruel, Victoria. There's no other word for it." Richard's voice was firm, but not unkind. "You publicly humiliated this young woman. You tried to break her spirit for your own amusement, and instead she showed us all what true grace and dignity look like." The crowd had quieted now, sensing the confrontation. Victoria's face flushed red. "I think perhaps it would be best if you left." Richard continued, "I'll make your apologies to the remaining guests, but your presence here is no longer welcome." Gasps rippled through the crowd. This was high society Connecticut. People didn't get asked to leave events like this, certainly not by co-hosts. Victoria drew herself up, trying to maintain some shred of dignity. "This is my house." "Actually," Richard said quietly, "according to your late husband's will, this house belongs to a trust that I help oversee. You live here at the trust's pleasure, and right now I'm not feeling particularly pleased." For a long moment, Victoria stood frozen. Then, without another word, she turned and walked toward the ballroom exit. Her heels clicked against the marble floor, each step echoing in the silence. No one moved to follow her. No one called out words of support or comfort. She had ruled this room an hour ago. Now she left it alone and diminished. When the door closed behind her, Richard turned back to Naomi. "Now then, I believe we owe you an apology, a proper introduction, and probably a job offer. Multiple job offers if I'm reading this room correctly. But first, perhaps you'd like to sit down somewhere more comfortable. You look like you've just run a marathon." Naomi laughed, surprising herself. "I think I'd like to find my sister, actually. She's working tonight, too." The other young woman in a server's uniform, Richard smiled. "I thought I saw a resemblance. By all means, find her. And then please both of you join me and the other guests. Not as servers, but as honored guests. I suspect there are quite a few people here who would like to speak with you." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of surreal experiences. Naomi found Maya and the two sisters held each other for a long moment, while guests discreetly looked away, allowing them privacy in their emotion. "You were incredible," Maya whispered. "Mom and Dad would have been so proud." "I played for them," Naomi whispered back. "For all of us." Richard Hayes was true to his word. He introduced them to guests as equals, not employees. People whose names Naomi had only seen in newspaper society pages approached her with genuine warmth and respect. Some wanted to talk about the music, about technique and interpretation. Others wanted to hear her story. A woman named Catherine Chen, no relation to Naomi's childhood piano teacher, turned out to be a music producer who specialized in discovering new talent. She pressed her business card into Naomi's hand. "Call me," she said simply. "We need to talk about your future." A retired Juilliard professor named Dr. William Morrison was in attendance visiting from New York for the weekend. He pulled Naomi aside with tears still fresh on his face. "I teach at the school you never got to attend," he said quietly. "But I want you to know that talent like yours doesn't need a degree to validate it. You've already surpassed most of my students. The music industry needs to hear you." An Arts Education Foundation director offered Naomi a teaching position on the spot. "We work with underprivileged youth, kids who love music but can't afford lessons. Someone with your story, your talent, your heart, you could change lives." Through it all, Naomi kept expecting to wake up. For someone to tell her this was a mistake, a misunderstanding that she needed to get back to clearing tables and being invisible. But it wasn't a mistake. It was real. Around midnight, as the event finally wound down, Richard Hayes approached the sisters one more time. "I hope you'll both forgive the difficult start to this evening. Victoria will not be hosting events in this house again, I can promise you that. As for the catering company, I'll make sure they know that you both left early at my request, and that you'll still be paid for the full evening." "Thank you," Naomi said. "For everything. For standing up for me when you didn't have to." "My dear girl, I absolutely had to. We all have to." Richard smiled sadly. "I've been complicit too many times in my life. Stood by while people were treated poorly because it was uncomfortable to speak up, because it might cause a scene or upset the social order. But watching you tonight, seeing your courage, it reminded me that comfort is overrated. Dignity matters more." He paused, then added, "My late wife was a classical pianist. Not professionally, but she played beautifully. She passed away 5 years ago, and I haven't been able to listen to recordings of her favorite pieces since. Too painful. But tonight, when you played the Debussy, I heard her in that music. I felt her presence in the room. You gave me a gift I didn't even know I needed." "Thank you." Naomi's eyes filled with tears again. "I'm glad. Truly. One more thing." Richard pulled out his phone and typed something quickly. "I'm sending you my contact information. If you need anything, references, connections, just someone to talk to, please don't hesitate to reach out. I mean that sincerely." When Naomi and Maya finally left the mansion, it was nearly 1 in the morning. They walked to Naomi's car in silence, both processing the impossible evening they'd just experienced. "What happens now?" Maya asked as they pulled out of the estate's long driveway. Naomi glanced at the business cards stuffed in her pocket, at her phone, which now held the contact information of people she'd never imagined meeting, let alone befriending, at her sister, whose college applications might not be quite as financially impossible as they'd seemed that morning. "I don't know," Naomi admitted, "but I think things might be different now. I think things might actually be okay." Maya reached over and squeezed her hand. "They were always going to be okay. Because you make them okay. You always have." Autumn returned to Connecticut with its usual display of red and gold leaves and crisp, clear air. But this year, Naomi Brooks barely noticed the changing seasons. She was too busy. The Naomi Brooks Music Academy occupied a modest storefront in Bridgeport, tucked between a bodega and a used bookstore. It wasn't much to look at from the outside, but inside, it was a revelation. 5 practice rooms, each with a piano, a small performance space with seating for 50. And students. So many students. Children from neighborhoods like the one Naomi had grown up in. Kids whose parents worked multiple jobs and couldn't afford traditional music lessons. Teenagers who'd never touched a piano, but who lit up when they discovered the instrument's possibilities. Naomi taught classes 6 days a week. Private lessons, group sessions, music theory, performance technique. And she loved every exhausting minute of it. The academy had been funded by a combination of sources. The Arts Education Foundation that had approached her at the gala provided the initial grant. Catherine Chen had organized a benefit concert featuring Naomi as the headlining performer, raising additional funds. Richard Hayes had quietly donated a significant sum and had encouraged his wealthy friends to do the same. But Naomi had contributed too. After that night at the Ashford estate, she'd been flooded with opportunities. Recording contract offers, concert bookings, teaching positions at prestigious schools. She'd accepted some and declined others, always keeping her focus on what mattered most, creating opportunities for kids who reminded her of her younger self. Maya was in her first year at Yale, studying biology on a full scholarship. She visited the academy every other weekend, often helping with the younger students. The sisters' relationship had always been close, but shared success had brought them even nearer. And Victoria Ashford. Her name had become synonymous with a certain kind of toxic elitism. The video of that night had gone viral, of course. Multiple phones had captured different angles of Victoria's cruelty and Naomi's triumph. The internet had not been kind to Victoria. Her reputation in Connecticut society never recovered. Former friends distanced themselves. Business opportunities dried up. She'd eventually sold the mansion the trust had given her that option and moved somewhere out west. Naomi had heard. She tried not to take satisfaction in Victoria's fall, but she was only human. On this particular October afternoon, Naomi was teaching a group of 8-year-olds the basics of reading sheet music when she heard a commotion in the academy's front room. She excused herself and went to investigate. A film crew had somehow gotten past the front desk. Cameras, lights, sound equipment, the works. And in the middle of it all stood a young woman with a microphone and a bright smile. "Ms. Brooks, I'm Sarah Kim from American Spotlight. We're doing a segment on inspiring Americans who are making a difference in their communities. Would you be willing to answer a few questions?" Naomi glanced back at her students, who were all peeking through the doorway with wide eyes. "Can it wait until after class?" Naomi asked. "I have students." Sarah Kim's smile widened. Actually, that's perfect. That's exactly the kind of thing our viewers want to see. A real teacher doing real work. So they filmed. The cameras captured Naomi working with her students, gently correcting their finger positions, praising their progress, making them laugh with terrible music puns. They filmed the pride in the children's faces when they successfully played their first simple songs. They filmed the Academy's modest facilities and the photos on the wall of all the students who had passed through the program. And they interviewed Naomi, asking about her story, about the night that changed everything, about what she hoped to accomplish with the Academy. "I want these kids to know that their circumstances don't define their potential," Naomi said to the camera. "I want them to understand that art and beauty and music belong to everyone, not just people who can afford expensive lessons and fancy schools. And I want them to have options, pathways, dreams that feel achievable." "Do you ever think about what your life would have been like if that night at the gala had gone differently?" Sarah asked. "If you'd walked away when Victoria Ashford challenged you?" Naomi considered the question carefully. "I think about it sometimes, but the truth is I didn't walk away. And not because I was brave or because I knew it would turn out well. I played that night because I was tired of being invisible, tired of letting people like Victoria decide who I was allowed to be. Sometimes the best thing we can do is refuse to accept other people's limitations on our lives." The interview aired 3 weeks later on national television. The Academy's phone didn't stop ringing for days. Donations poured in. Applications from prospective students multiplied. Other communities reached out asking for advice on starting similar programs. Naomi Brooks, who had once been invisible in a room full of people who had served champagne while being looked through rather than at, had become someone who couldn't walk down the street in Bridgeport without being recognized and thanked. On a cold December evening, Naomi stood backstage at Carnegie Hall in New York City. She wore a simple black dress, elegant but not ostentatious. Her hair was styled professionally. Her hands were steady. This was a benefit concert to raise funds for music education programs across the country. Naomi was one of several performers, though the promotional materials had featured her story prominently. The concert had sold out within hours. Maya was in the audience somewhere. So was Richard Hayes, Dr. Morrison from Juilliard, Catherine Chen, the older gentleman who had offered her his napkin. Dozens of her students had made the trip from Connecticut on a chartered bus. As Naomi waited for her introduction, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. Not just the journey from that night at the Ashford estate, but the longer journey. From a 5-year-old girl plunking out "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star" with her mother's patient guidance, to a teenager with dreams of concert halls and conservatories, to a 16-year-old facing an impossible choice between her future and her family, to a 28-year-old woman clearing tables and enduring casual cruelty, to this, to now. She heard her name being announced, heard the applause building, took a deep breath, and walked out onto the stage. The lights were bright. The piano, a magnificent Steinway, even grander than the one at the Ashford estate, gleamed under their attention. The audience was a sea of faces, but Naomi wasn't nervous. She'd played for 200 people who mostly wanted to see her fail. Playing for 3,000 people who wanted her to succeed felt easy by comparison. She sat down at the piano, adjusted the bench, placed her hands on the keys. And in the split second before she began to play, Naomi Brooks understood something fundamental and true. Music had always been her language, the way she made sense of the world, the way she processed grief and celebrated joy and connected with the deepest parts of herself. For 12 years, she'd been forced to speak in other languages, the language of service, of survival, of making herself small. But that night at the Ashford estate, she'd reclaimed her native tongue. She'd remembered how to speak in the language that mattered most. And now she would never be silent again. The first notes of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 filled Carnegie Hall. But this time, Naomi wasn't playing alone. This time behind her, a full orchestra began to swell into the music. The piece as it was meant to be heard. The piece as she'd always dreamed of playing it. The music soared and wept and thundered and whispered. It told stories of loss and love, of darkness and light, of falling and rising and refusing to stay down. It was every sacrifice she'd made and every dream she'd deferred, and every morning she'd woken up exhausted, and every night she'd fallen asleep worried about money and Maya and the future. But it was also joy. Pure, uncomplicated, soaring joy. Because Naomi Brooks had learned something that no amount of cruelty could take from her. Your worth is not determined by other people's opinions. Your voice matters even when others tell you to be silent. And the things that make you different, the things that set you apart, those aren't weaknesses to hide. They're strengths to celebrate. She played, and the music told her story. And in that story, thousands of people heard echoes of their own lives, their own struggles, their own moments of doubt and triumph. When the concerto ended and the final notes faded into silence, the audience rose as one. The applause wasn't just for the performance, though that had been extraordinary. It was for the journey, for the courage, for the reminder that none of us should ever accept being diminished by others. Naomi stood and bowed, and she felt her parents' presence as surely as if they were standing beside her. Felt the weight of their love and their sacrifice and their faith in who she could become. She had become that person. Against all odds, through all obstacles. Despite everyone who had told her explicitly or implicitly that people like her didn't deserve stages like this. But here she was. Here she would stay. And her music, her voice, her truth, her refusal to be invisible would echo far beyond this concert hall, far beyond this single night. Because that's what music does. It transcends. It transforms. It reminds us that we are more than our circumstances, more than our jobs, more than the labels others try to place on us. We are what we choose to be. And Naomi Brooks had chosen to be heard.